The rod is one of the 2 tech-based weapons the Force can use in New Genesis. It grants its users access to techs in their most basic forms, while also being able to block and counter. Because of this, the rod works great in any size fight, and at any distance. Starting off, the rod's normal attack is a simple ranged attack that can be used while moving and restores PP. We then have the step attack and dash attack, which are pretty similar to each other. However, the dash attack will travel through and damage everything in a line, while the step attack will stop at its first obstacle. Next up, we have the rod's weapon action, and this is simply a 360-degree block that restores 30 PP when successfully blocking. Then, when it comes to the Photon Blast, you will charge up and shoot a multi-element based energy beam. Keep in mind that this attack does not damage anything that's too close, so you should ideally be a few steps back from your target when using this. This also means that you can technically use this from behind an enemy and still damage the weak spot on the opposite side if you line up everything properly. Now, as we mentioned at the very beginning, the rod lets you use techs, and they will be the bulk of your damage. However, the rod doesn't really change how they function. So with that said, I will not be going over techs themselves in this video, as I would like to instead focus more on how the rod works itself. If you have absolutely no idea about how techs work in NGS, you should still be able to follow along. However, I recently put out a short video on techs, so feel free to check that out. With all that said, now that you have the absolute basics down, we'll be going over every Force skill that can affect the rod in one way or another. Building from where we left off with the rod weapon action, when taking the skill Elemental Bullet, after blocking with the weapon action, you will send out a ranged counter attack with the next tech you use, and this counter will be of the same element as the tech used. Fun fact, Uncharged Giveaway can block at the very beginning of its animation, right before the flames appear, and if you've learned Elemental Bullet, you will auto-counter when blocking this way. To make things even more interesting, with the skill Rod React Advanced, you will become invulnerable when using a technique directly after successfully dodging or blocking with the weapon action. This is great for times when enemies have follow-up attacks that would otherwise require you to block or dodge multiple times in succession. Next, with the skill Rod Tech Hold, if you end up cancelling out of a charged tech with a dodge or weapon action, you can then recharge that same tech extremely fast and at 0 PP cost. Then for the last of the actual Rod skills, there's Maintain PP Gain. And with this, if you don't attack for about a half a second after using a tech, you will see a blue effect appear around your character and will regain 15 PP. This essentially allows you to always have enough PP to cast something, if need be. Slow landing lets you fall extremely slow when charging techs mid-air. This will not affect uncharged techs, as they mostly maintain your altitude by default. The rest of the Force's skills have less to do with the rod itself and are essentially class perks, but let's just run through what's left anyways. The PP skills up top are nice, but after one point, how you spec into them is up to personal preference. The same goes for the Photon Flare skills too. However, Photon Flare itself gives a pretty nice buff for only one skill point, so I don't really see any reason to not take it, at least when using Force as a main class. Lastly, Barta, Blot, and Zonde-Clad are associated with the Ice and Lightning techs. I went over them a bit more in my NGS text video, but to give you an idea of how they work, Barta Blot places up to 2 stages of ice sigils on enemies when hitting them with a certain amount of uncharged ice techs. These sigils can then be detonated with a charged ice tech for extra damage, the second stage detonation dealing about twice as much as the first stage. Then, with Zonde-Clad, you will be put into a high voltage state after landing 10 uncharged lightning techs, signified by a purple ring around your character. When in this state, the next charged lightning tech used will have its power increased. And that's about it for the rod so far. I'm still not sure if splitting up all these tech-based videos was the right decision, but it's what I went with. And if you're interested in the Wander Talus, I'll be covering those soon too. But until then, take care.